You're listening to the Rural Remix podcast feed, your source for deeper, richer stories about life in rural places. Welcome to Living Traditions. I'm your host, Nicole Musgrave. If you're new here, this is a podcast where we dig into stories about folk and traditional arts in Central Appalachia. We look at things like food and craft traditions, along with music, dance, and storytelling. This week, we're launching part 1 of a 3-part series from reporter Anya Patron-Slepian. The series is called Mud in the Blood, and it's about contemporary artists who are maintaining pre-industrial pottery practices in Western North Carolina. Anya's joining us today to share a little bit about the series. Hey, Anya, welcome.
Hi, thanks. Happy to be here.
Great to have you. So tell us about the series and what drew you to the topic.
Sure. So, like you said, this is a series talking about makers in Western North Carolina who are using pre-industrial pottery techniques. The first story is about a couple who are producing their own clay from local minerals in North Carolina. The second story is about the next generation of Cherokee potters who are learning historic methods and also bringing them into the present. And the third story is about a group of potters who work together to fire a wood kiln over the course of 72 hours, which is a really laborious endeavor. So the reason I was drawn to these stories is because I myself am a potter and I'm really interested in pottery. And also, as somebody who's really interested in history, I think pottery is a unique craft because it's been around for so long. The oldest pottery shards that have been found are about 20,000 years old, which predates written history by a good 15,000 years. And so it's the way that we learn about ancient civilizations and human history itself. And it's something that looks different in different parts of the world and different cultures, but there are also certain things that are held in common as well.
So what was the experience of reporting these 3 stories together like?
Yeah, so I chose to go to Western North Carolina because it is so well known as a center of pottery, both historically and in the present. And I definitely was not disappointed. And I think probably the most exciting thing about it was even though all of the makers I talked to have very distinctive styles and are doing their own thing, they are all drawing inspiration from such a variety of geographies and histories and aesthetics, and getting to see how clearly in the pottery tradition the past and the present are interconnected was, for me, really cool.
And were there any themes that emerged among the 3 stories?
Yes, there were definitely a few things that every story had in common. I found that all of the potters spoke about this collaboration with their materials. They're not artists who are using clay, they're artists who are working with clay. It also became apparent with all 3 groups of makers that pottery was a force that was really helping to connect them with the community around them. And then I think the third thing, which is really relevant for the series of living traditions, is the way that they are all helping to pass on and continue traditions that have, in some cases, been around for thousands of years, if not more than that.
And tell us about the first story we're going to listen to.
So this story is about 2 potters named Naomi Dalglish and Michael Hunt, who are the collaborators behind a studio called Bandana Pottery in Bakersville, North Carolina. And most potters around the world these days, what you do to start a new project is you open a bag of industrially produced clay. But what Naomi and Michael are doing is processing their own clay from minerals and clay dirt that are coming from right where they live. And that means that there's this geographical specificity to their work that is really unique and exciting.
Great. Well, let's take a listen.
Outside, surrounded by mountains, Naomi Dalglish and Michael Hunt are processing wild clay. Michael has a 4-foot-long hand drill and a giant metal drum. He's mixing water with clay dirt to make a slip. The yellowish clay dirt they're using came from a nearby farmer's field. The first step in making the clay usable in their pottery production is mixing this slip, a watery clay slurry. Once the slip is the desired consistency, Naomi says it's time to strain out debris using a screen.
We actually have a couple of different sizes of screens because at this point we're deciding how much of the coarse material, like little bits of sand and small pebbles, we want to leave in the clay.
She pours the slip through a mesh screen that's fitted into a wooden frame.
We really enjoy having like a clay that has some texture to it. So this is in a lot of ways like one of the first aesthetic decisions that we're making.
Naomi and Michael are the team behind Bandana Pottery. They primarily make functional ceramics, like cups, bowls, trays, and vases, as well as some decorative items like large jars and sculptures. Michael says local traditions inspired them to start processing their own clay.
It kind of started from sort of seeing historical pots and seeing how a kind of a complexity and depth to the materials that we were really after. North Carolina has this amazing tradition of people using local clay that was kind of continuous.
Back outside, the slip is finished straining and is now in a large metal tub. Naomi opens a bag of feldspar and pours the white powder into the clay slurry, as Michael continues to mix with the drill. The mineral lowers the firing temperature of the clay. Next, Naomi and Michael pump the mixture into wooden racks lined with fabric. For this, they use a large brown hose pipe. The mixture is left in the racks to dry. Naomi says it takes between 1 and 4 weeks for the clay to get to a working consistency.
It really depends on the weather, how long that process is going to take.
For most of human history, potters have been restricted to the types of clays available in the ground where they live. Each geography produces clay with different characteristics, and this has informed how each culture's pottery traditions have developed. North Carolina is known for its plentiful natural clay deposits. For 3,000 years, Cherokee potters have used local clays to create intricate and functional pots that are hand-coiled, paddled, and stamped. Later, European settlers and their descendants began making wheel-thrown pieces and created the iconic North Carolina ash glaze style. Digging and processing clay is a lot more labor-intensive than a trip to a clay supplier. But Naomi and Michael say it's well worth the effort, for a lot of reasons. Part of it has to do with aesthetics.
It's kind of really about the expressive possibilities of particle size. We're playing with having the materials be fine enough to make functional pottery, but way coarser than like commercial materials.
Naomi and Michael say digging their own clay is also more environmentally sustainable than using commercial clays. It cuts down on transportation, and they're using a material that's otherwise a nuisance for local farmers.
It's like the sticky stuff that gets stuck on the bottom of their tractor wheels, or in like a field, it's where the water isn't draining as well. So it can actually cause some issues. So people are like, oh yeah, we know where that is, and are actually usually not too upset to let some of it go.
Processing clay is also cheaper than buying pre-mixed clays. But most importantly, they say that using local clays has been a constant source of creative inspiration.
The clay is like a collaborator. It has its limitations, but also possibilities. And we're constantly thinking like, oh, what do we want to do with the clay? But like, what does this clay want to do if it can't work in the way that maybe we're accustomed to working?
Inside the studio, Naomi is slapping a mound of clay to get it roughly centered on a pottery wheel.
This is a method that we use for making lots of bowls and cups. It's called throwing off the hump.
The wheel is surrounded by a wooden bench. Unlike electric wheels, this one is human-powered. She spins it by using her right foot to kick a second wheel near the ground. Naomi has around 12 pounds of clay piled high in a cone, which she begins to shape as she spins the wheel.
Every clay has its own character and limitations that sort of guide your practice. And then it's always sort of this dance, too, between how much do you want to take a clay that has its natural limitations and change it into something that could do more things, and how much do you want to just sort of explore what is this clay really good at doing.
Digging and processing wild clay also builds and depends on community connections. When Michael and Naomi first began experimenting with wild clays, they were supported by teachers at the nearby Penland School of Craft and other local potters. Since then, they've mentored many apprentices of their own.
I almost kind of forget that there were our apprentices. Now they're just like our pottery pals. We kind of are just sharing information a lot.
This sharing of information has helped develop a community of potters in the region who are interested in using local materials.
The pottery community in general tends to be like pretty open with knowledge that they have. We tend to get pretty excited and just geek out about it with our friends and share a lot of information.
But the community connection forged by local clays goes beyond just the potters themselves.
One of the facets of using local clay that wasn't intentional as a reason to do it, but that has been sort of almost a really wonderful side effect is like our connection to both the place and the people where we live.
Naomi recalls one time when a former neighbor was preparing his field for spring planting. He came upon some clay and decided to bring a tractor load of it down to the pottery studio.
We were so touched that he thought to do that, but we were also kind of like, so, what part of the field did you get in? We just wanted to make sure it was the right stuff. And he looked at us in sort of mock indignation and was like, I'm a farmer. You think I don't know my own dirt? And so that's kind of one of the times that we realized that we all just really have the same mutual relationship and respect for the same material. It was just sort of through different avenues. And he's someone to this day that we really value our relationship with.
Back at the pottery wheel, Naomi finishes throwing her set of bowls. Once they dry, she and Michael will turn them upside down to trim a foot, revealing the rough texture of the clay that inspires them so much as artists. The bowls are the ultimate collaboration, the result of Naomi and Michael's partnership, the generosity of a local farmer, and of course, the character and contributions of the clay itself. For the Center for Rural Strategies and Living Traditions, I'm Anya Patron-Slepian in Bakersville, North Carolina.
You've been listening to Living Traditions on the Rural Remix podcast feed. Music on today's episode is from Sarah Kate Morgan. Living Traditions is a production of the Center for Rural Strategies. Tune in next week for part 2 of Mud in the Blood, where we'll hear about the next generation of Cherokee potters in Cherokee, North Carolina. Thanks for listening.